All right, so you're good on your end?
Yeah, we're rolling.
So it's not live. You can restart all you want. I'll just get your name, the spelling, and your title. If it's the same as Twitter, then just name and title works.
Title? Okay. My name is Shannon Boschy. The last name is Boschy. My titles, work titles are Certified Financial Planner, Chartered Investment Manager.
Just like school board trustee.
Yeah, I'm candidate for school board trustee, running in Zone 6.
Cool. So there's been some pushback on your social media feed. Some people in the city are saying that it's transphobic, and they're calling you out and saying you shouldn't be running for school board trustee because of that. How would you respond to those kinds of allegations?
Well, I would say that it's become very apparent we live in an environment where people can't speak openly. There was just very recently in the UK around this same issue, the largest pediatric gender clinic in the world has been ordered shut down after a damning report. And part of that report is the condemnation of the work environment in this clinic, where they give kids puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And there was an environment of fear, intimidation, accusations of bigotry and transphobia, the exact same thing that myself and other trustees are getting. And that climate resulted in a major turnover in that institution over years, 35 therapists and physicians moving through because they couldn't tolerate it, but also others bullied into compliance, into putting, as the report said, ideology before medical ethics and science. And so we simply cannot exist in a society where groups of people are name-calling. By the way, for people who are running for school board trustee, setting an example of name-calling is bullying. We teach kids not to do this. So I'm open to having a rational dialogue, an open dialogue about the incredibly important issue of the exploding number of trans kids in our society. We know that from that same clinic, almost 50 times the number of children presented from between 2007 and 2017. By the statement of the head of the CHEO Gender Clinic not long ago in an interview, and I think it was a Bell Media property, indicated that 8 years ago there were 8 children presented to the clinic. In 1 year, it's now between 200 and 250. But we need to have open questions about what's going on with this, especially when the medical interventions that kids are being subjected to, including puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, can result in sterilization and a lifetime of sexual dysfunction. All conversation, all public statements, anyone like me who's trying to speak up is called a transphobe, a bigot. We're intimidated. I'm fortunately in a position where my partners, my business partners, aren't going to cancel and investigate me, but people are intimidated into silence by this kind of behavior. People get investigated, people get complaints filed against them, they're tied up in bureaucracy, and it's simply not the behavior of a civil and open society that we can accept as civil behavior.
Do you think gender ideology is something that should be taught in school?
No, absolutely not.
Why?
Because, well, let's look. In Ottawa public schools, there was a court case that was heard in the spring of this year because the teacher took it upon herself to teach children at 6 years old that there's no such thing as boys and girls. This is deeply confusing to children who still believe in Batman and the Easter Bunny. Okay? There is a line at a certain point where perhaps it's a conversation to be had about the diversity of people. But we are teaching kids about this in inappropriate ways. Any questions about this are being stifled. People get the same response that I do. Teachers bully parents. The institutions bully parents. We can see it in school boards all across the country. There's a civil rights case coming to the Supreme Court here in October about a school board trustee who tried to ask questions about this, who was slandered by his union. And we need to get rid of this culture of silence because the consequence, as I said, are the sterilization of particularly vulnerable children. 35% of the kids who went through the catastrophe in the UK, 9,000 kids went through that, 35% of them had autism. These are vulnerable children who get obsessed with ideas. Now, we figure out who we are as time goes by, as we grow up. We figure out who we're attracted to as we go through puberty. We figure out, I'm 50 years old, I'm still figuring out who I am. These are some of the big questions of life. We shouldn't stop people asking from questions who they are. But when we set up a system that is a medical pathway or a school to medicalization pathway, where we increase the risks of kids presenting for medicalization. We increase the risk of persistence of dysphoria by categorically affirming these identities in school. A generation ago, we have large bodies of research, 11 major studies that suggest if you just be quiet, let the kid explore their identities. Kids try on being princesses and superheroes and cowboys and animals as they're going through natural development. Those are experimentations in identity. No one would dream of affirming those kinds of experimental identities. Let kids experiment. But don't, as authority figures and authority institutions, affirm these and concretize these in children. The studies say that between 60 and 95% of kids will just desist when they go through their natural puberty. And they'll recognize, in most cases, that they're gay or lesbian if they're having dysphoria, which is fine. That's wonderful. But when we start concretizing identities, we increase the likelihood of a lifetime of dysphoria, which is a very, very uncomfortable and painful experience of not being connected to your own body. And we increase the likelihood of medicalization and creating lifetime medical patients.
So is your concern that by teaching this and by speaking about it more openly that there will be an increase in gender dysphoria?
Well, if you look at the numbers over the last decade, there's been an astounding increase. We're talking about 50 to 100 times the presentation. And from 2015 to now, we've seen a hyperbolic spike in the number of these cases. It looks like a stock market bubble. The graph just goes straight up. And there's some strange correlations here. One of them is when we started teaching it in schools, when we started affirming kids in schools. And by the way, there's strict policy. It's not just this school board policy, but provincial policy that teachers affirm children's gender identity, and where they deem necessary, where they deem the home unsafe, that the teachers will keep it secret from parents. This is atrocious. Parents have rights, as a matter of fact, rights enshrined in international law to be the primary moral educators of their children. And schools are stepping way over the line here.
Would you support GSAs, gay straight alliances, those clubs?
Well, GSAs have been around for a long time. When I was growing up and GSAs were emerging, this was an important place for kids who were learning in their teens that they were gay, lesbian, and to be able to have conversations with people like them, recognizing it's normal. There are plenty of reports and investigations in the States where these GSAs have turned into indoctrination. The belief that boys can become girls and girls can become boys is not a belief shared by the majority of society. Biology exists. We are sexually dimorphic. We are either male or female biologically. But we're teaching in schools that that's not the case, that we make up gender. And that's extremely damaging.
What impact do you think comments like that would have, especially if you were elected to trustee, on kids who are gender fluid and who are thinking of transitioning, either during school or after high school?
We're going to look back on this in 10 years, and we're going to see it for what it is right now. It's the largest medical scandal in human history. There are kids who have been affirmed. They have bought into these false ideas about our nature as biological beings, as mammals, that you can change from one sex to the other, and it's simply not the case.
We know gender queer people are at a significantly higher risk of depression, suicidal tendencies, thoughts. Are you not concerned that kind of language could have negative impacts on students that you could potentially be responsible for?
The studies don't support that.
Sure they do. I spoke to Chio today about it.
Yeah. There is a difference, and the first thing you learn if you study statistics and research methodologies in the humanities is there's a giant difference. It's rule number one: causation versus correlation. There is absolutely a correlation between kids with gender dysphoria and comorbid mental health issues. Like I said, autism spectrum disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, cutting. What we've done with gender ideology and what the Tavistock did, and what's published in the National Post yesterday by the editorial board and by the CAST review, is that the institution became solely focused on gender dysphoria as the sole cause of all of these problems. And it's scientifically preposterous to say that this is the cause of these other things. There's a correlation between all of them. But what we're seeing from a lot of other researchers is that we're actually saying it's gender dysphoria when it's something else. So what came out of the CAST review and the recommendation to condemn the clinic and open up other pathways was to focus first on mental health issues, focus on the whole child, focus on the history of trauma, focus on other issues that are affecting these kids and leading them to believe that gender identity is the cause of their problems. The statistics and research coming out now after the fact is not saying that these kids are getting better. They're at best staying the same. And in the cases of detransitioners, of which there are many thousands now, lots of whom are speaking out, they're saying that it made their lives immeasurably worse to go through this process, having been castrated, having no sexual function at all, having had their breasts cut off in surgery. This is a public discussion that we need to have. And there are going to be people upset by what I'm saying. And that is the price of living in a democracy. And it is the absolute need of being in a society like we live in, a free and open society, to debate issues rigorously to get to the truth.
Are you not concerned about the negative impact that taking this debate into the public school sphere could have on these students who are very real students? They exist.
Sure. Yeah, students are real. Students exist.
Sure, but these trans students, these genderqueer students who do exist.
We're talking about an ephemeral identity. We're talking about something that is self-diagnosed and stated.
Right.
Where people have been led to believe by an institution, by their perhaps their families, certainly online. There are groups and persuasive environments, Tumblr, Reddit, Twitter, all. You ask the question, how do I know if I'm trans? The answer is, well, if you're asking the question, it probably means you are. Children self-diagnose after being online and after being affirmed at school. They go to the medical clinics. In Canada, there's a clinic in London, Ontario, that is providing puberty blockers. These are dangerous cancer drugs, late-stage prostate cancer drugs, to children before a first appointment. At the very least, in Tavistock in the UK, which has been condemned, they were giving 3 or 4 appointments to have a conversation with a child and or a family about this issue. In Canada, we're giving these toxic drugs to kids before they even see a doctor. It's atrocious.
Yeah. I mean, the drugs are safe, but that's not what I'm here to talk about.
The drugs are not safe. The FDA in the United States just issued a strong warning that puberty blockers can cause blindness and are being demonstrated in children to cause brain tumors and osteoporosis. That's the Food and Drug Administration of the United States. 10 other countries, the French Medical Association, the National Health Ministry of the United Kingdom, the Health Ministry of Australia, numerous states in the United States are sounding the alarm about this. There are at least 10 countries who are speaking openly and speaking clearly that these are not safe, they are not reversible, they are not pause buttons.
I'm going to take us back to the school board situation specifically.
Sure.
If elected, how are you going to handle these conversations with gender diverse people on the board, with gender diverse students, because it's going to be a hot button topic? How do you have those conversations while sitting in a position of power?
You know what happens when a bubble bursts? Because I'm a stock market professional, I've been working in the industry for 20 years. You have a cohort of people who absolutely believe that the market is never going to go south. That U.S. mortgage-backed securities are the safest AAA thing in the world. And those are the bulls. And then the bears start to come out. The bears are the contrarians. And when the balance shifts, which is happening now around the world on this conversation, this school board discussion will be very small in comparison. We are going through in the next 3 to 6 months a major change in how we talk about this publicly, because people like me are refusing to be silenced by ideologues whose ideology results in children being castrated and sterilized.
Anything you want to add? Works for me. Appreciate you taking the time and doing this. It'll be 6 o'clock tonight on CTV. I'll send you a link to the story.
Okay.